much technical hitches. Here we are. I'm balancing a iPad on my laptop and I'm hoping that this is working. So good morning everybody, and thank you for hanging in there and waiting with me when I get this technical thing sorted out. It is really not my best at all. And anyway, a deep breath and here we are. So good morning. Thank you for joining us for this, the Resilience Factory's second Facebook Live. Last week, Gabby started introducing the myths that we're debunking around resilience, because so much is being written about it at the moment that we wanted to just start going into that and to talk about what it is that really authentic resilience is. So last week, Gabby started talking about the first R of authentic resilience, and we talk about debunking the myths of resilience. And on that first one, she mentioned the fact that in our partnership, I had faced a litany of loss. So I'm not going to go into the entire story, but I just wanted to tell you a bit about myself. So as you know, I'm Pippa Shaper. I'm the partner of Gabby Lowe. We together run the Resilience Factory here in Cape Town in South Africa. And my story is one of a lot of loss. Over a number of years, I lost two of my 4 children, my sister, my husband and my mum. And that all happened over a number of years. They were all individual deaths. But there is absolutely no doubt that I can say that grief is a good friend of mine. And the question I've been asked most often in all of that time is, how have you coped? Because it's true that I have coped, and I've done more than just cope. I've lived a life which is actually thriving. I enjoy my life, and I embrace the sadness, and I embrace the pain, I embrace the good times, and I really have been able to do more than just cope. I have been able to thrive. So that led me, in that question of how have you coped, to look at how I have coped and to think about what the different qualities of resilience were, which led me then to team up with Gabby, who'd been through her own severe trauma and loss and adversity in her family. And together we started looking at what resilience was together, and we formed the Resilience Factory in 2017, formed our model of the 10 R's of authentic resilience, which we've gone on since then to teach thousands of people around the world, and who have now used these tools for themselves to really live authentically resilient lives which are thriving by themselves as well. So let me start by saying that you do not have to have lived a life of tragedy or adversity to need resilience, to need authentic resilience. Every single one of us needs it, and now more than ever in these uncertain days that we're facing. You may have heard the expression living in a VUCA world, VUCA, which stands for a world which is volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous. And that's been talked about for the last 5 or 10 years, but my goodness, I mean, the last few weeks has absolutely catapulted us into this thought of living in a VUCA world. And because of that, because of the uncertainty that we're facing, so many people have decided to start looking into resilience, and a lot has been written about it. And as a lot has been written about it and has come up, what we have discovered is that a lot that's been written about resilience we actually don't agree with. And we formed our model through our own absolutely authentic experiences and going into that, as well as that of our clients within our coaching practices, and as well as all of the research that we've done. So this isn't just theoretical, this is deeply, deeply lived, the lessons that we've learned. So last week, Gabby started by debunking the myths of resilience, and she started with myth number 1, which was the fact that resilience is about bouncing back. Now, I have to say that I absolutely flinch when I hear that expression about bouncing back, because at times it can not feel like bouncing, but it can feel more like crawling. And the fact is that you do not go back. You don't go back to where you were before, and nor would you want to. But the point is that you can't unsee what you've seen. You can't unexperience what you've experienced. You cannot go back, but what you can do is you can grow forward. And it's that we're really wanting to do, to grow forward. And it's that place where you grow forward that you can experience what is called post-traumatic growth. And about 50% of people who go through traumatic experiences can go through post-traumatic growth, and then they can go on to live lives which are not just surviving, but they really are genuinely thriving. And I think since we posted that last week, what I've heard from people is an experience of relief to hear that you don't have to be bouncy to be able to be resilient. It doesn't have to be about bouncing. So today I'm going to go on. I'm going to talk about myths number 2 and myths number 3. So myth number 2, which people talk about resilience, is that they think that resilience is all about being tough and strong, about putting your head down, grit, pushing through, being assertive, being hardy, and just keeping on going. And the image that I have of that is like a medieval knight going into battle in a suit of armour, an impenetrable suit of armour, to fend off the arrows from the outside world. And the truth is that when we put a suit of armour on, it doesn't just protect us against the world, it actually shuts us off from the world. So authentic resilience isn't a suit of armour that you put on. Authentic resilience is born from deep within. It's born out of really going through it and engaging with it, and it comes through adversity, it comes through tragedy, but it's a capacity that we develop and we nurture through the tough times that we go through. So paradoxically, authentically resilient people are the ones who have the capacity and the courage to be vulnerable, to fail, and to forgive. And those are characteristics which are often thought as being weaknesses. But the truth is that authentically resilient people do that, and they are actually much stronger. So we get a good idea about strength and what resilience really is when we look to nature. So if you look at the most resilient trees and plants, they aren't necessarily the ones that look the strongest, the biggest, but they're the ones which are the most flexible and pliable. So if you look at, for example, palm trees, when you look at pictures of them, you imagine those pictures when they're being lashed by hurricanes, when they are blowing over, but they're not falling. Because of their pliable trunk and their really deep root system, it's enabling them to keep really steady and to bend without breaking. And they're able to do that and withstand the toughest, most severe weather conditions, whilst a much bigger tree, for example, the mighty oak, the limbs go crashing, or in fact the entire tree is uprooted. So when we resist rigidity, just being tough and strong, we actually develop the capacity to become more authentically resilient. So being tough and strong, this idea of resilience can also be talked about grit and perseverance. We were running a course last night, and somebody in fact said that that resilience was about being gritty and persevering. And the difference is, there's no doubt that grit and perseverance is a part of living an authentically resilient life, and that's one of the things that we teach. But by no means is it all of it. So grit is the ability to persist to reach our long-term goals, whereas resilience is an adaptive process which affects our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions. So putting on a suit of armour, if we go back to that image, putting on a suit of armour to make us resilient actually doesn't protect us. What it does is it shuts us down from ourselves, it shuts us down from the outside world, it disconnects us from other people, and it really closes us off from living a truly integrated life. So the key is, when we look at that myth number 2, is not to put the suit of armour on, but to think of resilience as something that comes from deep within us, that's born and which makes us more flexible, more adaptable, and more able just to go into life living it in a way which is truly authentic and connected and is thriving and embraces all that life has to offer. So related to that is myth number 3, very similar in a way, is that resilient people don't do emotions. So it's true that what the image that we have of resilient people is often that they don't dwell on their emotions. That's true. But authentically resilient people really do, they're able to engage with a full range of emotions, both that of their own and those of other people as well. And they're able to emotionally regulate around that. Now, another thing which I've read recently, which is, I have to say, annoys me as well, is when writers write about negative and positive emotions. Because in doing that, in talking about negative emotions being positive or negative, we then label them and judge them as being good or bad. And what can happen if we do that is that we look at the negative, the bad ones, and we just think, right, let's just avoid those and just not go there. And by doing that, we actually shut off a whole part of ourselves. And we avoid the fact that actually emotions are just that. They are emotions. Emotions are emotions. They don't have to have a label, a judgment label put on them. They are varied, they're complex, and they're paradoxical. But emotions need engaging with and bringing out into the light. When we try and shy away from those challenging emotions such as fear or anger or loneliness, and we try and shy away from them, they actually decrease our resilience when we do that. What we need to have to do is the courage to actually face our deepest, darkest emotions and not to try and segregate them and put them somewhere else. So when we face a challenging situation, a lot of different emotions will come up for them. Some of them will feel easy to name, some will feel more difficult to pinpoint, some will feel familiar, others will feel unfamiliar. Some will feel scary and others will feel absolutely downright terrifying. And when we look at those difficult emotions, we'll think, well, won't deal with them. I'll shove them away, put them aside, and try and just suppress them, pretend they don't happen. But shutting our emotions away just isn't sustainable. They need processing. Suppressing just pushes them away. And what we can be sure happens if we try and suppress our emotions is that they're going to come back and trip us up later, or they are going to spill out sideways and come out as anger or disconnection from other people, or in ill health or depression. But if we try and suppress them, if we try and push them away, it's not going to work. So authentically resilient people do emotions. And what I can promise you is that if you don't do emotions, emotions are going to do you. Now, I have learnt this the hard way because for the longest time I tried to suppress my emotions. I really tried to avoid them. In the most difficult time I went through was after my husband died and I was left a widow at the age of 38 with 3 children aged 5, 11 and 12. My children going through their own grieving process. I was trying to work, raise a family single-handedly. And what I did was I was so overwhelmed by both the range and the depth of the emotions that I faced that for the longest time I just put them away. I shoved them away. I tried to suppress them. I avoided them. And I just tried to put a brave face on and get through it. But what happened in that was I ended up just so angry. I was angry at God. I was angry at life. I was angry with my husband for dying. I was angry with everything. I was just angry. And that anger spilled over into every area of my life. And it didn't create for an authentically resilient life. I was just clinging on. And finally, through a lot of writing and going into therapy and being able to talk to people about somebody about my emotions and to truly process them, I was able to face them by bringing them out into the light. It takes bringing our emotions out into the light doesn't get rid of them, but it really dissipates them. And it enables us to start looking at them in all of their true form and to start processing them and to integrate them into our part of life. So to bring our emotions out into the light, to not shove them away, to not disengage with them, or to only concentrate on the positive ones, does ourselves a great disservice. So if you're feeling that, if you're feeling that some of that's resonated with you, that maybe you're somebody who has been too scared to face your emotions, they've been pushing them away, or you are all too aware of your emotions and they are overwhelming you, just to offer you a really simple thing to do, the very first simple thing that you can do is to start writing them down. Literally to start writing down your feelings, saying, I am feeling this, I am feeling, and go through the full range of emotions that you're feeling. Acknowledge every single one of them, and really just start engaging, allowing them, just allow them to be. They will not kill you, but in trying to suppress them, they very may well kill you. They can. That's when they overpower us, is when we do try and ignore them. So when we talk about resilient people don't do emotions, all I can tell you is don't bother, because I've tried it and it doesn't work. So they're not going to magically disappear, and if you bring them into the light, but it's really well worth it. And the interesting thing is going to be, when you start bringing your emotions into the light, what you're going to realize is that there are very, very many varied emotions, and also that they're very complex, and you can feel them all at the same time, even though they seem completely contradictory and paradoxical. So, for example, right now, in this time of coronavirus, you might be feeling anxious about where your income and finances are going to come from. You might be feeling really scared for a family member who's got ill health. You may be feeling sadness about what you've lost in your life. You might be feeling boredom about the fact that every day is like Groundhog Day and we're going over the same thing again and again. And you may be feeling real irritation about the fact that your freedom has been curtailed. And you might be feeling incredible gratitude. And you also might be feeling at the same time a real sense of contentment about the quieter way that your life is being lived at the moment. And the truth is that you are allowed all of those feelings, and you're allowed all of those feelings all at the same time. And where we do ourselves an injustice is where we try and pin ourselves down to one emotion, and then we label ourselves with it, saying, I am scared, I am lonely. And the truth is, you are not those things. Those are not your identity. Those are the feelings that you are experiencing at the moment, and they're not going to own you, and they're not going to label you, and they're not going to identify you. But just by identifying all of those emotions, bringing them out into the light and laying them in front of, sitting with them, just being able to sit with them, you will realize they're not going to kill you. They're not going to overwhelm you, but you are going to be able to get through, and you are going to be able to step into a life which is about embracing all of it, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So that is myth number 3, myth number 2 and 3. Myth number 2 being resilience is all being about being tough and strong. And myth number 3 being about resilient people don't do emotions. So I hope that some of that has resonated with you this morning. You've picked up something from that. And if you want to find out more about the work that we're doing, about what authentic resilience really is, not the myths about what it isn't, but what authentic resilience really is, please go along and visit our website, theresiliencefactory.com, where you'll find more news about our upcoming courses, which we're running. Another course starts next week if you'd like to join that one. And it's available, of course, the great thing about going online, it's available to anybody in the world, which is fantastic. And we're loving seeing so many people joining us on these courses. So I apologise about the late start and about the rather hectic beginning, as I had all my kids in the room trying to sort it out with me. But yeah, resilient people persist and we get through, and we're adaptive as well. That's the other thing. So thank you so much for joining me this week, and join Gabby next week at 9 o'clock on Tuesday morning, where she's going to be debunking some more of the myths about resilience. Thanks.